Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06. It's O'Connor and Company here on a Wednesday morning, the first day of May. Good Lord. What happened to the first 4 months of this year? It's insane. I'm getting old. It's all right. Coming up later this morning at 7:35, the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Winsome Sears. Early voting starts this week for the primaries. Also, find out what she thinks about these campus protests in Virginia. At 8:05, Congressman Michael Waltz of Florida wants to discuss the classified documents that Biden had. Oh, yeah, remember that story? I'm Larry O'Connor. Mollie Hemingway is in for Julie Gunlock this morning. Mollie, good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here with you.
It's great to have you. It's been fun, and it will continue as well, especially with our good friend Governor Scott Walker, president of Young America's Foundation. Governor Walker, I'm sure you're shocked to see this kind of behavior on a college campus.
Yeah, it's amazing. Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Mollie. It's good to be with you guys. It is amazing, but yet not surprising. It is outrageous.
Something tells me Young America's Foundation is sort of used to seeing images similar to this.
Well, and me personally, too. I mean,
sure.
I think of the 100,000 protesters we had, and, of course, we get this. The irony is, so our people, as you know, Larry, our students at Young America's Foundation will come in and get a permit, reserve a room, do all the things we're supposed to, and still the administration and the student body government will try and shut us down, even though we do everything by the books. In this case, they're largely doing nothing by the books. I pointed out at the University of Wisconsin-Madison that it's actually in the state law. The administrative code prohibits encampments that people stay overnight on any university campus. Those people should be arrested. I think for the ones doing damage, whether it's at Columbia, Harvard, or anywhere else, they should arrest them, remove them, and expel them. There has to be consequences.
You should be encouraged, though, by seeing certain levels of defiance. I point right back to your efforts and your organization's efforts at college campuses to offer an alternative idea and an alternative message. We see some pretty heroic students standing up to these protesters and trying to stand their ground. And several years ago, we wouldn't even see that. It was so one-sided.
Oh, no,
or students were intimidated into silence to just hide in their dorm room.
Exactly. Yeah, no, in this case, there's no doubt about it. We reached out to that wonderful student at UCLA who stood up and confronted. I mean, these images are amazing, even by recent standards. It's what I've said. It's more than just left-leaning or liberal bias. It's the radicalization of our university campuses. But I think people decided enough is enough. They're going to push back. And we've had students and staff at Columbia, at George Washington University, at UCLA. We're going to push back anywhere and everywhere. And again, as you've heard me say before, if you're under attack, YAF's got your back. YAF.org, YF.org. We'll help them out.
Governor Walker, isn't it interesting that so much of this campus activism has been targeting conservative students over the years, and people didn't really seem to care. And now we have these pro-Hamas situations happening on campuses, and people are finally waking up to it. But wouldn't it have been more helpful if they would have realized that their support, like even these donors who were giving money to the campuses, to these universities, up until quite recently, were fine with some of this same ideology when it was part of the BLM riots or other left-wing activist groups? Why are they just noticing now?
Oh, you're right. When Bill Ackman came out at Harvard, for example, we said, welcome to the party. You're a couple decades late, but we'll take it, right? We're not complaining. We'll take whatever help. And it is interesting. He's a good example of not only being upset about the obviously anti-Semitic, downright just out to get Jewish students and Jewish people approach that so many of these pro-Hamas folks are articulating. But he started to say, hey, I've noticed there's other things they do. And so it's rather eye-opening. And it's a good reminder, too, for any of the listeners out there, not only encouraging students through our group or other groups like ours, but if you give money to your alma mater, stop. If they don't support at a minimum an enforceable free speech policy, if they're not willing to protect students who have maybe a minority viewpoint on campus but not in society, if they're not willing at a minimum to protect Jewish students, I mean, imagine these scenes we've seen over the last few days. If these were black students, it would be equally as horrific, and obviously tragically in the history of our country have had scenes like that long before most people listening were even born. But But I just always say if it was one group versus another, why would we be outraged? But we're not now.
Well,
we should be
Governor
outraged in every
Walker,
one of these instances.
you pointed out that your groups are always following the rules for having speakers, and they get so much trouble. Is there a way that they could take advantage of this current moment? Meaning, could they set up encampments and start making a list of demands? For instance, having a certain percentage of professors not being far left activists, or demanding that they be treated with respect when they bring speakers on campus. Like maybe it's time to test the consistency of these administrations in this environment.
I like it.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. So one of the things we've done for the last 2 decades is put up one American flag on campuses all across the country for every innocent life that was lost on 9/11. And first, it was very obvious, Republicans, Democrats across the board were for it. The last few years, amazingly, Larry knows this, there's been some blowback, which is outrageous. But we did a similar thing since October 7th, providing 1,200 Israeli flags for all the lives that were lost on that day. And we, the other day, actually gave the flags and helped put out the flags on the campus of Columbia, just as a pushback to say, hey, we're not backing down. Similarly with UCLA, we've got Robert Spencer coming in, the head of the founder of Jihad Watch, to talk about what exactly is happening with Hamas and how outrageous it is that these kids would be aligned with them. Well, the administration, not surprisingly, said, well, we're a little concerned about what's happening. It was like, no, we have a permit. We're going to be there. We don't care. The bottom line is we're going to help push on all these campuses and say now is the time to step up, not just to push back for conservative causes, but particularly to counter the outrageousness of these protesters, not just because they're not following the rules, but because of what they're standing for. It's just completely out of whack with reality.
We're speaking with Governor Scott Walker, president of Young America's Foundation. And if you could put your Wisconsin hat on, not that you ever take it off, it's a cheese head. He wears it all the time. It's very embarrassing. President Trump has
you want to talk about the Packers season?
No, let's not. President Trump has the day off from his trial, and he's going straight to your state, Wisconsin, for a rally. First of all, what do you think the landscape is politically right now in Wisconsin, as the polls look pretty good for President Trump this early on? But secondly, and more importantly, I think, the significance of where he's going, Waukesha. You've talked about it a lot. Waukesha is an important part of Wisconsin when you're looking to win that state.
Well, there's no doubt about it. It's where my home is. He's actually going to be a few blocks from my home. He was in Green Bay a few weeks ago the last time. So the fact that he's coming back is a great sign, because you remember 8 years ago, Hillary Clinton, after she lost the primary to Bernie Sanders, never came back to Wisconsin or Michigan again. And obviously those were two critical states, what they then called the blue wall.
Mm-hmm.
That wall came down and Donald Trump was elected the 45th president of the United States. I think his coming back sends a powerful message to suburban voters, some of whom walked away 4 years ago, that, hey, I think there's a lot of voters I hear from who say they could handle a little bit of political instability in return for some economic and public safety security when it comes to high prices, border security, and just public safety overall.
Do you think Wisconsin's going to be possibly one of the most frequently visited states between now and Election Day, and it's going to go down to the wire?
Yeah, there's no doubt. With Trump in Wisconsin today, with Biden just recently there, with Kamala Harris, although, again, if I was their camp, I might figure out ways to not have them come to Wisconsin on the other side, because I think they actually lose votes, particularly with Harris. But I think with President Trump and whomever eventually he picks as his running mate, they're going to be there often because, again, he won by winning Wisconsin in 2016. In 2020, he lost just barely 23,000 votes out of nearly 6 million people. Right now, in any number of reliable polls, he is ahead, but it's within a point or two. I've always said when I ran and won successfully 3 times statewide in Wisconsin, you have to win by typically 3 to 4 to 5 points to make up for the problems you see in places like Milwaukee and Madison, and we've seen that in the past since then. Yeah. Problems, yeah.
Problems is a great euphemism. All right. Governor Walker, we're going to leave it there, but I've said it before, you're going to be somebody we're going to be drawing on quite a bit this election year, and anytime, because you've got great insights. And by the way, Milwaukee is also the site of the Republican National Convention. So, yeah, it's all about Wisconsin, right up until football season starts, and then you guys just disappear. Thanks, Governor.
Good to talk to you, Larry. Have a great one.
It's 7:16. Let's get straight to it. Let's give you an update here if you're just waking up or just joining us. Overnight violence broke out at the encampment on the campus of the University of California, Los Angeles in Westwood, California. 3 blocks away from Andrew Breitbart's home, by the way, where we all used to work every morning, go drive right past UCLA to get to Andrew's home and get down to the garage and get things done. It took hours for LAPD to show up. They finally did around 5 in the morning, right when we started our broadcast, 2 in the morning LA time, in riot gear. But it looked as though the campus and maybe even elected officials decided, just let it, let it burn off, let them blow up steam. But there was, the violence, it looked like a war zone on the campus.
Well, it seems like we've actually been going through weeks or if not months of letting things fester. And once this week we saw students start to take over buildings, create entrances that Jewish students were not allowed to go through. People started to realize it was becoming more of a problem. Yeah,
and you mentioned occupying buildings. That's what happened at Columbia University last evening or late yesterday afternoon as they took over Hamilton Hall on campus. That seemed to be the line that, couldn't be ignored anymore. NYPD came in, removed people from the building, and then started to clear the campus encampments out, although based on some of the images I'm seeing this morning, there's still some tents there, and there's still some residual presence of the encampments on Columbia University. In UCLA, the process continues.
Yeah, and I think unless you actually expel students who are disrupting classes for everybody or otherwise engaged in prohibited activity, it'll continue in some form or another. Also, it's May. What a nice time to be camping outside in New York or LA.
In LA especially. It is it's the only nice time really to go camping. And by the way, in the middle of Westwood, you don't want to actually go where critters are and things like that. It's much better camping. Earlier in the day yesterday, ironically, on MSNBC, this was the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, talking about the protests on campus.
Well, I think both schools have handled them the best that they can. But I will tell you that right now, both USC and UCLA are peaceful. I know that the administration is talking to the protesters and trying to come to a peaceful resolution. So I feel good that we will get there.
They keep using the word peaceful, Mollie, but I don't think they know what it means. Because I'm sorry, when you occupy a place, take it over, build up barricades, and prevent innocent civilians or anybody from actually walking across the campus they're allowed to walk in, that's not peaceful. By definition, that is already an aggressive act.
Well, also, it's just a completely inadequate word to use to describe the situation. If students do not have free passage, they might not be hitting them over the head, but that's still obviously not protected activity.
Yeah.
You can't tell Jewish students or anyone else who disagrees with your ideology that you can't use this entrance. That's obviously not okay.
And let's be clear, you can't use this entrance because you're Jewish. It's like it's not being emphasized.
It's not being emphasized, but also we've gotten so used to it because there's so much racism from the left right now.
That's true. Although I have to say, in Los Angeles and in Northwestern University that we're about to share, the Jewish students have actually become relatively empowered and vocal. It's we're drawing a line here. And they've been fighting back. I love the move in UCLA where somebody funded a giant digital scoreboard, outdoor video screen to play the October 7th terror attacks on a loop.
It's brilliant, and it shows that the best thing you can do to speech that is wrong is correct it with speech that is right, or just respond with speech.
And here's a pro-Israel counter-protester shouting insults at the protesters at Northwestern. Eat a salad, he's saying, which I don't know. That could have been Kurt Schlichter for all I know, screaming, body shaming.
It sounded like it almost.
Body shaming the pro. And here's another one at Columbia.
You have no friends. This is all you have. You have nothing else. Most of you are very ugly. Many of you don't know what gender you are. You are all very mentally ill.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That is so true. You look at the pictures and it's like, oh, these people feel very badly about themselves. They should take a shower. They should just put a little bit of effort into presenting themselves, and they might actually get real friends.
Yes. I honestly had a flashback. I mentioned Andrew Breitbart. That's Andrew on his rollerblades yelling at Occupy Wall Street protesters, right? Stop raping people. Meanwhile, Christopher Rufo is now reporting that Ivy League universities have hired decolonization scholars. and recruited left-wing activist students and elevated sympathetic administrators. Let them deal with the consequences. It's true. This is all shot through the prism of colonizers, that Israel is a colonizer here. And if you're the victim of colonization, then you're on the righteous side of the earth.
But I also like what Chris Rufo is saying here, which is this is a problem created through the administration. They have hired these people who teach this hatred for other groups. It has festered on campus. People have been rewarded for teaching these things. I say let them deal with it. I mean, they could easily deal with it however they want to. Why is it everybody else's problem that they have lost control?
Well, here's why. Because this is the world they've created. You're right. But we've paid for it. That's what sticks in everybody's craw right now as we see this develop. But let's finish this segment with the feel-good audio of the day.
You have no friends. This is all you have. You have nothing else. Most of you are very ugly. Many of you don't know what gender you are. You are all very mentally ill.
I give that man a medal.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:36 now. O'Connor and Company rolling along here on this Wednesday morning. Coming up at 8:05, it's Representative Michael Waltz of the Armed Services Committee, Florida man. Not in a Florida man kind of way. I just mean he's a man from Florida. Although he would wrestle an alligator, Mollie
I totally
Hemingway.
could see that happening.
I could see that happening. He's an Army Ranger, you know. I'm Larry O'Connor. Mollie Hemingway's in for Julie Gunlock this morning, and Mollie, your lieutenant governor, is on the line. How much do we love Winsome Sears?
I'm pretty excited about this.
She's fantastic. Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia and one of our faves, Winsome Sears. Good morning, Lieutenant Governor.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Mollie. Good morning to your listeners. Can I say I can feel the love?
As well you should. Although I don't want that to get me. See, HR's going to call me now. Why are you, making Winsome Sears feel love? I got to ask, we're going to talk about early voting for the primary and how important it is for Virginians to get out and vote. But first, we saw the scenes from VCU where the police finally cleared out those illegal protests. And yet overnight now we see in Charlottesville at the University of Virginia, same kind of thing happening with this encampment on behalf of the Hamas terrorists. As the lieutenant governor, where do you stand on the lines being crossed here between free speech and violations of individual students' rights and illegal activity?
Well, this is the thing. I'm thinking about, as someone said, we learn from history that we don't learn from history. And if we were to put this in the context of the Ku Klux Klan and their protest against black people, Larry and Mollie, can you ever imagine that the KKK would be allowed to set up camps on the lawns of these schools, on the campus of these schools? Can you imagine
and keep black students from walking across the campus?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And what we have found is that this is a very coordinated, well-financed effort. What do I say? What do I mean when I say that? Because they found, the law enforcement on campus, et cetera, that there were pickups that were dropping off supplies of bricks and stones and food and water bottles filled with unknown substances, which we've identified now as really beer spray. So it's not even pepper spray. It's the really hard stuff, concentrated stuff that's intended to harm. And the tents and the tarps and the lumber and the pallets. And they have the money to do this. And then they paid protesters to come in. So that's why yesterday I put out a video. Look, if you're from out of state and your objective is to do violence and mayhem in Virginia, go home. Turn around right now and go home. We don't want you here.
Can anything be done with some of these groups that are funding and coordinating to disrupt government university campuses? Like maybe it should be more than just being told to go home. Are there actions that can be taken to investigate or prosecute here?
Yes, there are some activities that were done that were felonies. There were some that were misdemeanor. We are not going to slap hands and just leave it be. There must be serious consequences. And so you saw that there were 13 arrests at VCU over the weekend at down in UVA, I believe it was or is it Tech? There were 82 arrests over the weekend.
Yeah, that was at
Some
Tech.
of them were students.
That was at Tech.
Some
The Charlottesville encampment began late yesterday afternoon and into
late
the evening.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. And that one you saw was pulled up very quickly. They were not allowed to encamp because the school policies say, no, we've seen this before. It only leads to violence. We're not going to have it. So immediately they were not even allowed to encamp. So we are hoping that the Commonwealth's attorneys in those areas will press the charges to the max, because they've got to know you cannot terrorize people. That's not First Amendment rights. As long as you're not being violent and you're protesting, you have your First Amendment rights, that's fine. But when it turns to violence and terrorism, you've got Jewish students who are absolutely afraid. And by the way, they're professors.
Yeah.
Their professors are out there supporting the other side. I can't imagine if I were a black student and saw that happening. My professor.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't that actually speak? Shouldn't there be things done for the faculty, for the administration? Meaning, a lot of these problems were caused by these professors teaching hatred for different student groups. We've known they've been doing this for years, that they've been teaching this hatred.
Yeah,
this
we've heard the term "personnel is policy."
Right.
So when you fill the campus with these professors,
it does make you wonder whether the regions could be doing a much better job of ensuring that the professors are not part of these awful ideologies, or that there's more balance on campus. And that's a much longer term problem than just the protests of today.
Yes. I mean, they have First Amendment rights too. We totally get it. We get it. But my God, if I were a Jewish student, I think I would have to ask, who's on my side? Does anybody care? And so we want parents to know we are very much trying to protect your student. We want them to return to campus. For goodness sake, this is their week of finals.
Yeah.
They're trying to have a hope in the future. And all everybody wants to do is mayhem. No, we can't have that. That's not what this is about.
Well, and Lieutenant Governor Sears, this comes at a week where we've got early voting starting now for the primary process. We've got an election coming up. And I think that it's an important time to sort of remind everybody why it's so important to make sure their vote is counted. Because when you look at states that are run by Republicans right now, like Virginia, thankfully, finally, with your victory and Governor Youngkin's victory and Attorney General Miares' victory, this kind of thing is stopped. It doesn't fester. We don't see what's happening at UCLA or at Columbia. States like Virginia and Georgia and Florida and Texas, you're not playing these games anymore. And that makes early voting this week that much more important.
Yeah, and we say, playing these games, unfortunately, some of these games leads to not games, but there are true consequences in people's lives. We are still having to figure out how to bring even more people on these law enforcement staff, because they are still understaffed. Some of these places, for example, in Norfolk, they're 100 staff down, 100-man down. You need personnel to keep security and safety. We want opportunity for everybody, but you can't have opportunity unless you have safety and security. That's first and foremost, and I think that's the first rule of government, is to ensure that. So elections have consequences. When we came back in, we brought common sense back. We're not going to defund the police. We're not going to demoralize them. We're going to have education values. We're going to make sure people are safe. So the election primaries, June 18th, folks, you've got to start voting absentee ballot. You never know what can happen. I have my ballot, for example, at my home in the middle of September for an election that doesn't happen till November. So tell me, Larry and Mollie, who has the upper hand? The person who has 45 days at the pie, or the person who only gets to eat the pie the one day?
Right.
Of course, the 45 days, right?
Yep.
So are we playing chess or are we playing chess?
No, we got to get our piece of the pie. I'm hungry.
Common sense, man.
We got to leave it there. It's always a great conversation with Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears. Thanks for joining us, Lieutenant Governor. Good to talk with you.
Thank you for having me. Good morning to everybody.
Mollie, CBS News was handed an illegal leak that they're now reporting about. It happens all the time. Because oftentimes it's like the Washington Post reporting based on anonymous sources. No, they're not reporting anything. They were deliberately handed an illegal leak for the purpose of getting a story out there. That's how this works, right?
That's how Washington, D.C. thrives on that.
That's DC. And then they hand people awards for basically doing exactly what the government wants them to do, which is to print this thing that they didn't want to say out loud. Well, here's what CBS News is putting out there that the Biden administration doesn't want to say out loud. Multiple agencies within the federal government, within the executive branch, are now working out a plan to accept refugees from the Gaza area.
Oh, what could go wrong?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been reported for years that these are people who for the last 20 years have been educated to be the vilest, most horrific anti-Semites. And by the way, they hate America too.
There's no question that the Palestinian people are suffering under their leadership of Hamas.
Yes.
Hamas is very bad for Palestinians, so is Fatah.
And yet, over 70% of them.
Well, they've kept them impoverished. They've gone out of their way to avoid having a peaceful settlement with their neighbors. But having said that, yes, polls show that people are overwhelmingly pleased with their leadership in Gaza. I think it's 70 to 90% of people are in support. And so the idea that this would be a good group of people to import to this country when we're already having problems with people just understanding with clarity that it's what happened on October 7th was a very bad thing. It just seems like a disastrous idea.
Yeah, it sure does. And, well, I mean, listen, I remember when we brought in refugees from war-torn Somalia and we embraced them and welcomed them with open arms, most of them settling in the Minnesota area. And, now one of them is a congresswoman, Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, it's a real success story.
Well, if you're a Democrat, it is.
And if you hate America.
It's 7:54.